Young Turks, everybody. Welcome to the show. Ben, Wes, Michael, BMW, baby.
It's a lot of...
out of order, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, WMB. The search for WMB
begins now.
That's right. Cenk not here today. Be back Monday. His show, obviously, 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 Pacific on MSNBC. Wes, welcome.
Thanks, man. It's this feels like a major sausage fest here. 3 men all together. I mean, there's not even a woman out there in the control room.
No.
Yeah, there are 7 men in this.
We could get a poker game going.
We could get a poker game going.
So we were talking last week, Wes, when we had a meal together. You had a lot of interesting things to say. But the final events hadn't happened in Egypt. Mubarak hadn't yet left power. And we talked about what might happen next, what state might happen next. And interestingly, I believe the day we'd eaten was the day that we had lunch at a Mediterranean restaurant.
Lebanese, actually.
Lebanese, oh, how ironic. Delicious, by the way. That was the same day that the king of Bahrain gave $3,000 out to every single family in an effort to stave off unrest. Apparently
wasn't enough.
Yeah, didn't give quite. Maybe needed to go to 5.
Yeah.
So now we've had 4 killed in fighting across Bahrain, and a very small island country, just 500,000 people in the whole country. But now it looks like it's spread there. It's hard to believe that it would start in Egypt and then spread to Bahrain, and then that would be the end of it.
Well, Bahrain's a little different. I mean, it's the population is primarily Shia. The sheikh is Sunni.
Right.
The Shia don't have a lot of rights. They've kind of been agitating for years, and $3,000.
But isn't that similar?
It's a lot of money, but it's apparently not enough.
Isn't that Shia-Sunni divide similar to a lot of the monarchies in the Arab world, where that keeping the Shiites in place is what they've wanted to do as Sunni monarchies, to sort of keep them happy? But it's not unique to Bahrain at all.
No, it's not unique to Bahrain, but what's unique is
they
have a higher percentage of the population that's Shia. Whereas Saudi Arabia does as well, but it's only 20%, even though that 20% is mainly situated around the oil fields.
Right.
And what the protesters are demanding there is that the Sunni leadership give up its sort of lock hold of key government positions, which it's of course apparently unwilling to do, and thought perhaps it could buy its way out of. But violence erupted there, and I think as I mentioned, there are 4 dead.
Interestingly, the king himself led the attack on the protesters this morning.
Which is interesting also.
Personally, like in a tank.
Like he was out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would think a majority, from what I've read, of the protesters have said that they're okay with a monarch who's just not, sort of like England, who has nothing to do with the way the government is run. He's a ceremonial monarch. But now that monarch who they were supporting got into a tank and sort of led the battle today. It was like the old days.
Yeah.
Here's a little of what it looked like, and it's not. It was a little scary, as you'll see, specifically for one ABC News reporter. But here's a little of what it sounded like and looked like overnight in Bahrain. In Bahrain.
Really? In Bahrain.
That is frightening.
It was in Bahrain. What happened was
surprisingly, it looks a lot like the street.
3 white guys sitting around a table.
For the first time ever in Bahrain.
They're trying to
Those are the sounds of an army attack, sort of what had been at a peaceful demonstration.
Yeah, but it's an army attack, but it's an army attack that's not using live ammunition. Those are concussion grenades, tear gas grenades, and they're firing rubber bullets.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
But still scary. 4 people dead. Interesting piece from Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. I think that's clip 2. As he sort of walked with the protesters before the army got busy before they got busy breaking up the protests. Here's Nick Kristof's piece.
I'm here to be with my brothers and my sisters. We want democracy. We want a free country.
Dictators seem to have trouble learning their lessons. One of the issues in Tunisia and in Egypt was that crackdowns just created a backlash, created more antagonism toward the government. Here in Bahrain, the government did the same thing. It had staged a brutal crackdown, and this is a funeral for one of those people who was killed. They're are so many people out here who have been just enraged by that killing and are saying they're continuing to march and demand the overthrow of the regime. In the United States, some people are worried that the result of this movement might be a hardcore Islamic republic like Iran. What do you say about that issue?
I can't say this. Absolutely, this is not true. Because the people here are demanding democracy, human rights demands, and respecting people's choices, the peace change of the authorities. That's what we demand.
We want to live in democracy. They are pretending that we have democracy and we're not.
With peace and blood, we will redeem you, martyr. It's not a great. It's not a great sign.
The one Bahrain's a little more complicated because the Saudis are always going to point to Iran because they're going to back the Bahraini royal family. So they're always going to point to Iran and say, "Oh, this is all orchestrated by Iranian intelligence because they're Shia, and they'll have, Iran will have a beachhead then on the Arabian Peninsula, and so they're going to back the Bahrainis all the way," which is why you saw the Sheikh went out and personally attacked those protesters because he knows he has Saudi backing for it.
Leaving that part out, well, I guess you can't leave that part out. What is it? Is this likely to work? I mean, or are
Who knows?
have we reached a point where this sort of crackdown is pointless?
I don't know. I mean, look, what you see is if you do a crackdown and you're willing to kill lots of people and be a pariah, crackdowns work. I mean, the crackdown worked in Iran this week.
Yeah.
And it worked in Iran before. I mean, it worked in China. If you're willing to kill your own citizens and you don't have a problem with it or what people think of you, it works.
Something else, I mean, that's plainly obvious, especially when you see what happened in Egypt and how they didn't, crack down in that way. They cracked down early, and then that crackdown ended because the army was sort of complicit with the protesters at a certain point. But one of the things that strikes me about listening to the story about Bahrain, sorry, I can't keep a straight face when I say it like that, is that we're a very egocentric country with good reasons sometimes and with ridiculous reasons sometimes. But none of these people in Egypt, certainly, and in Bahrain they're not aggressively anti-American when they're saying these things. Even though we have coddled these dictators and these monarchies, and we have been friends with them, we play the hand we're dealt. This is not about America. This is about democracy, and it doesn't strike me that these people are trying to be anti-American at all, which is a big fear in America.
I don't care whether it is or isn't. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're mainly having it because they're tired of getting beaten and pushed around.
Of course, but I'm saying the stories that you read here and the fears that these people are talking about, that the people on the outside are talking about, is that what does this mean for America? Is this going to have crazy Islamist government?
Yeah, but you got to understand, most of those fears are all being pushed by either Israel or the Saudi royal family to hold on to power. You don't know what the truth is.
But it's a reflex of Americans now. I mean, they interpret this as they interpreted in other places, as they interpreted 9/11, that this is an anti-American part of the world. When in fact, these people are not thinking about America. They're thinking about being repressed by a monarchy.
Being realistic, it is going to be an anti-American part of the world. It has been. It will continue to be. The question is, will it be kind of anti-American or rabidly anti-American?
Okay, I'll grant you that. I know Ben wants to say something, but what I'm saying is that it's not motivated by that.
No, of
at
course
all.
not.
These are people that are repressed by bad governments, by dictators, by monarchs, whatever it is, and they want democracy. And it's not because they hate America or they resent their leadership for hating America. They resent their leadership for repressing their rights, which is totally different. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
All right, thanks.
I'm taken by the point about that sort of crackdowns work if you're willing to be hated, if you don't care, if you're willing to kill your own people, then the crackdown is going to work. One of the reasons why, I guess and it worked in Iran, and it's worked for years in Iran. There have been, any number of these sort of legitimate, authentic, genuine student uprisings in Iran, and eventually there's always a crackdown, and it always works in rebuffing the uprising. But it didn't work in Egypt. And there wasn't a serious effort at the crackdown. And I think in this case, America's role mattered. It certainly wasn't the motivation in any way, I agree with you, behind the uprising. But Egypt's relationship with the United States mattered in that they couldn't, it's not as easy for Egypt to be the bad guy. because of the relationship that they have with the United States. That
No,
would have
that's
presented
true.
a very
That's
different.
true.
It would have presented a very different problem.
But Bahrain is a very important, certainly strategic point in the Arab world, in that we have a naval fleet there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we are stationed there.
So, and the reaction from the from the reaction from the Obama administration and Secretary of State Clinton was stronger, certainly, than it was against Egypt in the beginning. And it'll be curious to see how we respond to that, because yeah, the relationship with Bahrain is similar. And like you said, okay, 4 people killed, but as you pointed out, what would you say, stun grenades or
It looked like there were
toy grenades?
concussion grenades,
Concussion grenades,
flashbangs, and
yeah.
Nerf. There was a lot of Nerf.
But what happens if it becomes a legitimate crackdown? I don't mean to suggest that was not.
Well, I'm
that's
sure
illegitimate.
they rounded up probably 1,000 or 1,600 people. I mean, there's no telling what's going to happen to those people.
So what happens?
They don't
if
have to shoot them in broad daylight. They can shoot them in a basement.
So okay,
somewhere.
what happens if it gets significantly uglier? What do we do?
There's not much we can do because the Saudis are willing to fund it.
Well,
So it's not like with Egypt, the Saudis
But then it does-
stepped in at the last minute. They're like, "Hey, dude, who cares what America thinks? We'll replace
but
that."
then we
$1
are
billion."
the way we didn't in Egypt, the
Yeah.
way we didn't become the bad guy in Egypt. Then I could see very quickly that it could turn into us becoming a bad guy very quickly in a country like Bahrain, where we have the naval fleet there, and it gets ugly.
My opinion is we shouldn't be in any of these countries. We shouldn't even be in Korea or Europe, as far as I'm concerned. It's a total waste of American money. And it doesn't win us any friends. It doesn't make life better. I mean, look, they've got oil. You know what? They have to sell the oil. Everyone's like, oh, we got to have an army there to protect oil supplies. No, you don't. They're selling the oil. They're going to sell it to
So
anybody,
where
no matter
should
what.
we have troops now? I mean, like if we
Nowhere. We don't need an empire anymore.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, look, the Soviet Union fell. World War II is over. Come on home.
As simple as that. But
Yeah.
don't these countries want us there? I mean, isn't it? It's not just us saying that we want to protect the oil reserves. I mean,
No,
doesn't
well, that's the whole problem. It's called entangling alliances.
right?
They suck us into stuff. It's just the same way we toppled Saddam because a bunch of little countries around him said, hey, go after Saddam, go after Saddam. Just the same way the Saudis were pushing us to attack Iran.
So give me then, in your world where this would happen, and it seems somewhat far-fetched for this to happen, I would guess. I mean, it's a
only-
trickle down from the Marshall Plan, and it just keeps going. But I mean, in terms of where we situate our armed forces, certainly in Europe. But what I'm
well, the
wondering
only
is,
reason they're in
let's say-
Europe is because it's closer to the Middle East.
Of course.
That's
but
the only reason they have them there.
What's the downside? Like, what is the downside? What is the risk of pulling every American troop out of the world? I mean,
Well, there's tons of possible risks, but also if you're propping up governments that aren't popular,
Yeah.
those governments are going to fall anyway someday. Why not just get it over with? Why waste the money? I mean, we're going broke. Like,
Right.
what do we need soldiers
Well,
for in
then we
Korea?
don't-
Why
then-
do we need them in Japan?
then do we need a military? I mean, then do we need this big a military? I mean,
No,
what do we
we-
do with all
no,
these people?
we
Yeah,
don't.
exactly. So then there's the whole
So
issue.
you're saying
of-
we really just need a military to defend ourselves?
Well, yeah.
No, I'm saying that, but that's it, right?
and not to
Yes.
defend our allies because we are the strongest military, quote unquote, in the world.
Yeah, we don't need. Why are we defending Europe? From what? Who are we defending them from?
Well, I mean, it's like, why do you have an alarm system? Nobody's going to rob my house, but when they do, at least you have the alarm
Okay,
system.
well, when that next super big threat starts to appear, then you can rebuild an army. You can expand the size.
And
of
what do
it.
you
like
do
a-
with all these employed military personnel who are going to be coming
Well,
home?
you know what? These employed military personnel aren't doing anything economically productive anyway. You could pay them to do jobs that actually produce value.
And where are those jobs?
No, then
Well,
you'd
you have to
invest
create
that.
them.
Right, you'd spend that money invested in the infrastructure. You'd build some.
Yeah.
You'd build some
High-speed rail.
You'd,
Yeah,
right,
that's
you'd
right.
expand the highways. But there's a lot of libertarianism there, at least from a
No, it's
defense
not
point.
libertarian. It's not libertarian. See, that's the thing is because I guess Ron Paul probably said something to that effect.
He
So
did.
everyone
Well,
goes,
about-
that's
Well, no, it's
crazy
just- I was
talk.
about
The
to
thing
s-
is, it's not. What's crazy is the Soviet Union fell, and we said, okay, we have a geostrategic advantage. We're going to keep pushing it in Europe and Asia to prevent another kind of regional hegemon that can come out and control the Eurasian landmass. Well, that's never going to happen because you got China
I don't
and
want to
Russia
pretend
are
like
gonna
I
be-
understood what you just said.
I actually did.
I mean, it's not
I
rocket
don't make any
science.
pretense that I'm the third smartest person at this table.
Dude, look, there's no reason. It's a waste of money.
But when Michael says, what about defending our allies? I mean, that seems legitimate. Aren't there people...
Which allies? Who do we need to defend?
Well, obviously
'Cause here's the
England.
thing,
They look just like us.
Okay, who's about to attack England?
I don't know. The French? I don't trust those guys.
Yeah.
Well, look, there's nobody we need to defend, and the people we would, like, for instance, you know, they're going to, some of the Baltic nations that'll be coming into NATO or something, really? Americans are going to go to World War III against Russia to protect Lithuania's independence? Really?
No, but
you really think that'll happen?
Didn't our, and I'm asking you this without any opinion of my own, didn't our position in Europe during the Cold War and obviously the natural expiration of those Cold War values in Russia and the Soviet Union, didn't that contribute to the spread of democracy and the breakdown of the Soviet Union? I mean, let's say we weren't there. Wouldn't that have encouraged the advancement?
Wait, you mean after World War II?
After World War II.
But I'm not saying we shouldn't have been there after World War II. I'm saying we don't need to be there now.
Indefinitely.
Yeah, if you left after World War II, most of mainland Europe would be communist.
Right.
But eventually it would have
who's
fallen
the arbiter?
anyway.
Who's the arbiter of when you should get out? I mean, you know,
Well,
I think
why are we there? What is the threat? What's the threat?
the threat in Europe, I would agree. I don't know what the threat in Europe is. Listen,
what's
there
the threat
could be
in
a threat.
Japan?
Well, there could be a threat between the Turkish and the Greeks and the Armenians, and I mean there are hot
Turkey
spots.
and Greece had a conflict
Well, of course they did.
already,
Of course
and
they
both
did.
were NATO members,
Of
and
course
we
they
didn't
did.
stop that conflict.
Well, but that's true, and I'm not saying that we're going to stop that, but we might be stopping the spread. I'm hypothesizing. I mean, there are people that believe devoutly that our military should be in other places because
You're right.
It's protection of democracy.
Those people are imperialists.
Well, I mean, I don't think uniquely they are. I mean, or
No, and they don't either. The same way I'm
Yeah.
sure people 30 years ago
I
didn't
think you
they
can
were
have the
racist,
opinion,
but they were still racist.
No, but I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think you can have the opinion that our military should not all be in America protecting our borders, since we've been attacked once in the last 200 some odd years. I don't think it's unfair to say that you're not an imperialist just because you think that we can have American military helping our allies, protecting our allies, training the military of our allies.
Okay, that's fine. We can work with people. We can have allies.
Right,
we
but
can train
what I'm
them.
saying is
why do
going
we
to the
need to
level of
have
imperialism
troops everywhere?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, it's a provocative point, but I just don't. I don't
it's-
see
it's
that we
simply-
need to have them
Look,
nowhere
let
either.
Do we have to take a break soon, or can I explain the way the
You can
world
explain
works?
it.
Okay. The world works based on...
I'm going to take a break.
It's
though.
are you?
Is that all
Okay.
right? Yeah.
It's an evolution of systems, okay? And a system comes into place the same way people think, oh, there's one or two conspiracies out there controlling the world. There aren't.
Yeah.
Shit just evolves, okay? And the people running the organizations and working for your organizations kind of surf around on the top of it to keep their positions of power, influence, and authority. And so when, you had the wall come down and the threat of communism disappeared, people said, well, let's keep those troops there. Let's keep those troops there because you keep your power and authority over the Europeans. You can still kind of threaten the Russians if necessary, but do we need to?
Is there
I mean,
something? Isn't there something probably in between? I mean, can't we bring clearly? It seems to me that we have too many bases and too many troops. And isn't there some reasonable something in between where we have, like, I don't know, one base, put it in? What do you think? I don't know, Norway. Let's put it in Norway. They could use some help.
It's too cold in Norway.
All right, fine. Norway's out. Put it in Greece. Put it in England. Keep a bunch of guys there, and then that's it. And they're there, and then it's sort of a little menacing threat.
But what do you still need it for?
I don't know, in case things get out of hand with the Russians.
But you're saying automatically we're responsible for everybody's security.
No, I'm not saying we're responsible.
And that's how we got in
What
this
about
mess.
what about ships in the Indian Ocean? What about
ships in the ocean?
I mean, what about having people at the ready? Our military personnel.
To do what?
What about South
To do
Korea?
what?
About South Korea and North Korea?
What about South Korea and North
All right,
Korea?
I mean,
do you know what those troops at Camp Casey are? The
I don't know what
20,000
Camp
Americans we
Casey
have
is,
there,
actually.
just
Is
south
that-
of the
is that-
DMZ.
okay.
They're a speed bump because they wouldn't be able to stop a North Korean attack. Their job there is to die so that it gets Americans fired up, and then we send more troops over.
That's a bad job.
But even with Korea, I mean, look,
terrible job.
why are we even there?
Yeah.
The South Koreans don't need our help.
Right.
Their economy's booming.
Right. It's not a matter of the economy. I know their economy is booming, but I'm guessing, knowing very little about the
They're
South
also,
Korean
the South
military.
Korean army, they're badasses.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I know very little about the South Korean army, but
isn't
The
there
ROK is hardcore.
isn't there value in, and I don't know, so just
by the way, this is a guy who wanted to put our troops in Norway. So
Yeah.
just,
I know, that's fine.
isn't there value if you and maybe not, maybe that you're drawing no distinction between Russia and England. Don't care. They're both essentially the same now. There's no perceived greater threat.
There's a distinction between them, but neither one is going to have a massed armored attack like flowing across the plains of Europe.
So we don't need to worry about any, at this point, you say there's no fear whatsoever in any way between any kind of Russian aggression that we would even need to keep our eye on?
Not really,
Okay.
no.
All right, well then, fair enough.
That is another question though. In this hypothetical, what do all of the leaders of these countries, allies and otherwise, but especially our allies, say if President Obama wakes up one morning and says, you know what, we're bringing them all home. We're bringing everybody home.
Right,
we don't need to be anywhere.
That's a fair question.
Okay, what do they say? What do you think they're going to say?
What does Putin, maybe does that suggest some sort of weakness? Does that change the game plan for Putin?
For Putin, exactly.
Does he think,
Great
well,
point.
wow, all of a sudden maybe this is now I can exert a greater sphere of influence? And does that mean anything?
Russia has a declining population of hardcore alcoholics. That's a nation that may not even exist in 15 or 20 years.
Okay, that I won't buy. I mean,
you're kidding me? You won't buy that?
Well, that Russia's not going to exist in 15
the Russian
or 20
Federation
years,
in its present structure won't.
Why, when they're really,
Okay.
when they're really young, are Russian women so incredibly hot, and then as they hit like 45,
Alcohol.
It's
Alcohol,
alcoholism,
dude.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a nation. See, that's what I'm saying. It's not going to not
But why
exist. It's going to
then-
be a nation of really ugly women
but
late
why,
in life.
But why then are so many alcoholics here so thin?
Are you talking about homeless alcoholics? Or?
Yes, I am.
Well, yeah, because they're homeless. Go in the Midwest.
So
You'll see not all alcoholics
How
are
do
thin.
Russian alcoholics get homes? That's really the question.
A provocative question. All right. And all of a sudden,
Because
Mr. Smart Guy, you don't have a
Look who's quiet.
I'm just going to say, you guys know I'm right. You know it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
And we do it because it makes us feel tough and big and, hey, America #1, but it's a waste of money.
I tend to agree with you, and nothing makes me feel tough and big. Okay.
Come on, dude, a big American flag
And by the way,
coming out of top of a tank.
I'll give you
Driving
20
down a
and a
foreign
half
city.
years. 20 and a half years. I'll take the over on the existence of Russia. $100 bet right now. I'll see you in 20 and a half years.
In 20 and a half years, Poland will be the #1 power in Europe.
Oh my God.
Not Russia.
I'm in.
Bet 'em, bet 'em,
I'm
bet
in.
'em.
250.
Bet me.
250.
You got it.
We'll be right back. Young Turks, everybody. Ben, Wes, Michael with you. Thanks for joining us. Teresa Strasser, a friend of mine, she co-hosted with Adam Carolla on the Adam Carolla Show for many years, and now co-hosts the Peter Tilden Show, or is on the Peter Tilden Show, mornings on KABC Radio out here. And so it's a very conservative station, and the mornings, Peter Tilden Show, Peter Tilden's a great guy, and the morning show is fairly local. It doesn't have these sort of strident right-wing aspects that much of the network's programming has throughout the day.
But that's where it starts. That's where they grow it.
What do you mean?
The strident, right? The local, the strident right-wingness of.
Yeah, but I mean that shows like they talk about like how to refinance your mortgage a lot and sort of what's happening and it's a lot of live, local, and late breaking.
Right.
But anyway, they had David Frum on as a guest, and former Bush speechwriter. And he was on and he was talking about the budget, and then Teresa decided to ask him a question. And the show took on a political turn that it doesn't usually get on KABC. So here's the question that the voice you'll hear is Teresa talking to former Bush speechwriter David Frum.
We're talking about budget and big cuts, and to me, it seems evident that the big cuts need to come from our defense spending. I keep wondering, a little part of me keeps wondering, why doesn't President Obama get Attorney General Eric Holder to indict Dick Cheney, who very clearly seems guilty of war crimes?
Well, of course, the president could do that if he wanted and dared. The president made a decision early on that he would not, and that I think there are a lot of reasons why he wouldn't do. First, that the idea of Dick Cheney as some rogue actor within the American political system
Right.
it's absurd.
There were a lot of other people involved, but why not indict you and all the rest of them?
Including, for example, the leaders of the Democrats.
So David Frum was then pointing out that the briefings that the Democratic leadership, that Jane Harman and
former Congresswoman
Jane Harman, and that Nancy Pelosi and I guess Bob Graham, who was the Senate Intelligence chairman at the time, got in 2002, and whatever, they didn't get full briefings, but you know what? It was a great abdication of responsibility on their part, but again, they didn't do it.
Right. But also the best part of the question, even though why not you? That never goes over well with the you.
Yeah. So anyway, the conversation. By the way, David Frum was who's a fairly thoughtful guy in the world of those guys.
Yeah.
And who condemned the torture during this interview. Said that no, it stopped that's why it stopped in 2003, because it wasn't really producing results, and it was a bad part of American history. Like, we shouldn't have done it. But he's like, that said, it didn't rise to this level. And so, but anyway, Teresa continued, and she continues to go on that these were unquestionably war crimes. So here's more of that back and forth with David Frum.
Political system made these decisions collectively. It was not done by rogue operatives.
But who's going to be held responsible? I mean, you can't obviously throw everyone in jail. A guy like Cheney,
why should anybody
was repeatedly defending waterboarding and going to the dark side.
Why should anybody go to jail? I mean,
because it's a war crime.
Well, that's a very arguable proposition, but
not really. I mean, the Common Article 3 of the Geneva Convention makes it very clear what a war crime is.
It's an arguable proposition.
It's too bad it wasn't a video interview, so you could see his face.
I mean, this is like the best stuff I've ever heard in my life.
It's an arguable proposition. Not really. Yeah. No,
right.
No, it isn't. Yeah. So then David Frum starts to go in another direction, and he says, when she called him a war criminal, he says, well, that's not the kind of heated rhetoric that we want in this political environment. We should be working together. And again, I want to point out there are plenty of conservatives who have gotten angry at David Frum because he has been too cautious, they think, in his approach to commenting on Obama, and he's not off the rails, David Frum.
Yeah.
But so he starts saying that that we should stop using that sort of heated political rhetoric, and he starts saying that I don't think we should. For example, I get heat from my Republican brethren when I say, hey, we shouldn't be calling Obama a Nazi or saying that he's a Muslim. And then Teresa comes back in.
Yeah, and here's one more thing, and I would say this to the liberals and Democrats in the audience. I've shed a lot of blood over the past 3 years with my Republican counterpart saying, don't call Obama a Nazi, don't call him a Muslim,
right.
Have some respect for it. But those
things are untrue, and this is true.
Karma. What has happened
not the same. He's not a Nazi.
Well,
however, Dick Cheney is a war criminal.
Well, I'm sorry. You are sowing the wind and you reap the whirlwind, and that kind of inflated and hysterical way of talking is, of course, going to be cycled back through the political system. And if you want to calm it down, if you want to have a more realistic approach to presidents and their difficulties, if you want to pull the way you oppose a president back within the rule of the game, you have to do it yourself. And all of our motto in this situation in American politics needs to be, let the change begin with me. And if I don't like hearing wild accusations thrown,
That's not a wild accusation, and I love this country too much to pretend that Dick Cheney is not guilty of torture and that somebody shouldn't have to be accountable.
But
let me ask you this.
It's not a wild accusation. There have been many books written on it, including Torture Team, and many experts agree that this was indeed a breach.
Why don't we take this up next time? We can continue with it. You'll look at the article. We'll discuss it.
I know, but to understand that it's like calling Obama a Nazi, it's just not.
Yeah, that was fantastic work by Teresa Strasser.
I love this country too much.
I love that the guy says he sheds blood.
Yeah.
That guy hasn't, the only time he's probably ever shed blood is when he's, shaving in the morning, maybe.
And then he mesmerizes you with, he's just sowing the wind and reaping the whirlwind. And I was like, really? But after that, I hear how reasonable she is and making the point that I wish so many people would make. And then her host, who I know nothing about, I have to confess, steps in and says, well, let's table this to another time, or let's talk about this next time. And I really, it's not.
Well, he's friends with David Frum, and also they had gone way over time.
It's a non-starter with anybody political. I was at a there's this fundraiser.
He's also a great guy, Peter.
I think for
I'm
city
sure he
year
is, but you know,
or something down in Arkansas a few years ago that Bill Clinton was at, and I was at, and afterwards we got to talk to Bill, and I was like, how come your wife didn't press charges against the vice president?
Yeah.
Like I brought all this stuff up, and oh yeah, we can't do that. You know, then they'll be accusing us of doing stuff. And
by the way, much better than your Honduran accent.
And my parents were like, you sounded crazy talking like that. It's like, why is that crazy? Why is it crazy if, like, I don't know, we invaded a country and killed hundreds of thousands of people, blew our entire budget, put my children in debt for the rest of their lives? Why is it crazy to bring these assholes to justice?
Yeah, well,
what's so ridiculous about that?
Well, I think it's a reasonable argument to say that we shouldn't do it. I don't, but at the same token, I certainly don't think it's crazy to suggest that we should.
You don't think we should do it?
I don't know what I think. I think it's reasonable to say that it's a dangerous slope to start doing it, but I don't think it's a crazy conversation to have. Maybe we should, but we ought to be talking about it.
I think we unquestionably should. I think that is why you have oversight. That is why you have balance of power. And if you have the Senate with all this information, you have the House, and certainly now it would be more likely that the Senate does an investigation. It might even be under their purview. But no,
it's why you have an independent prosecutor.
But it's also,
so, yeah,
and then I was just getting to that. It's also you have the power of the president to appoint an independent prosecutor to look at this stuff. And if you don't do that, I think that is an abdication of your responsibility. I totally do.
I tend to lean this. All right. So finally, then, what this has led to is, of course, this being a significantly right-wing station for the rest of the day, just an endless stream of Teresa bashing, and she's, you know, so smart, so sweet.
She's single?
No, she's married. Her husband's.
And she loves her country so much.
She, you know what? That's awesome. She totally does.
No, I believe it. I mean, you could hear it coming through.
So she's still on the station?
Oh no! Her by the way, her program director is like, this is awesome.
This is great. Nobody likes attention.
So anyway, so Larry Elder is the next show, and he's just making hay of this, and so are the callers. So I'm going to play one quick caller ripping Teresa, just in the interest of being fair.
Right.
Belle is in Torrance. How you doing, Belle?
I'm fine, Larry. It's so nice to have you back.
Thank you.
Why can't all the talk show hosts be as intelligent, rational as you are?
Ugh.
That's a good question.
I'm curious about what I just heard from you about this woman that co-hosts with Peter Tilden. She should be fired. She's a bonehead. She's an idiot. She's biased. She's ignorant. All she does is sell her stupid book on the talk show. I don't listen to that show anymore.
All right. Well, Belle, thank you for the call, and I appreciate
deli
your
is that
passion,
woman calling
but my purpose here was not to beat up on anybody personally.
So he mentioned that all she's trying to do is sell her stupid book on the talk show. Is that right? Is that what she said? So her book, by the way, called Exploiting My Baby, available on Amazon. Exploiting My Baby because it's exploiting me, available on Amazon. It's terrific. I've read it. You should pick it up early and often. Buy one for your friends. It's incredibly funny, and it's available now.
Right. And by the way, she didn't mention her book once on that show just now. So for Belle and Torrance had it
I love my country and I love my book.
Yeah, it's called Exploiting Your Baby or My Baby.
Anyway, good for Teresa. That was good stuff. So moving on to far less important stories, but stories I think that perhaps are a little more fun. So there's Jesus, did you get that other video that I mentioned to you? That fun video? No? Yes? Is that I can't see you. Are you shaking your head? Lazy Mexican. Okay, so single mothers, right? This is a great poll from the Pew Research Center, right? So they polled about changing attitudes about the new structure of American families, right? And they found that Americans, about gay families and single-parent families and people living together with kids who aren't married, they polled 1,700 Americans to determine if they feel that certain trends are good for society, right? And whether they make any difference at all. These listed trends included unmarried couples raising children, gay and lesbian couples raising kids, single women having children without a male partner to help raise them, more people living together without getting married. Respondents fell into three categories. Those who believe that all these things are good for society, those who believe the majority of the trends are bad for society, and another group labeled skeptics who were generally tolerant, right?
Yeah.
Except for one thing, single mothers. Like people who are like, I got no problem with gay people raising kids.
What's that segment? I've never even heard that as a controversial thing ever.
All of a sudden, people are like, I don't mind gay people raising kids. I don't mind people raising kids who aren't married. All these things are okay.
I almost don't believe the numbers.
But what they found in the numbers that what we are tired of is single mothers raising kids.
It's absurd.
Yeah. Why would that be? Do you think?
Well, don't ask him.
Don't ask me.
Whatever you do, don't ask him. But I don't. I mean, I've never heard of anything like that. I've never heard of one person. You know, unless you're asking people who are opposed to the welfare state, and when they hear single mother raising children, picture a welfare mother with 9 kids feeding off the government.
But I think maybe that's what's happened.
That's
I
what's
think
happened.
most single mothers are probably just divorced.
Yeah.
But that might be that image has
Yeah.
been what is permeating, and that's the sense
Yeah.
that these are
that makes the most
that there's
sense.
a little racism seeping into that, maybe
Just a little, you think? I mean, it's
just some sort of Murphy Brown sort of that we got tired of it, and there's some sort of
I don't see
backlash.
that at all. I mean, that would be in popular culture, you'd be hearing about that. People would be talking about it before it just shows up in a poll. I think that this is exactly what you just said. I mean, I think it's racist, but I think it's classist. I think it is, in opposition to the welfare state. I don't think it has anything to do with a value judgment on it. I think the value judgment is these people are living off the state and they're having 9, 10, 12 kids, and my taxes go up, so I have to support that, which is absurd because that is not what this is about.
I found it incredibly puzzling. I mean, in one sense, because the study on one hand is sort of welcoming. That
of course, people are saying that
right, family dynamics are changing, and who cares?
Right.
But weird that single mothers. You can say something.
No, I was going to say let's get out of this segment before Wes has a shot.
I'm not going to say anything on the subject.
Okay, well done.
All right, when we come back, the whole men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or men are from Venus, women are from Mars.
No, men are from Mars.
Men are from Mars? Right, men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
So the book said.
So the book said, and it turns out the book is full of crap.
Really?
Totally, like 100%.
Well, I don't think it was meant to be taken literally.
I thought it was fact.
Yeah.
John Gray. No, he knows.
Right.
But anyway, there's an actual some science now to prove that he's wrong, and we'll tell you about that when we come back.